Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. So, got a fair bit to speak about this week. I thought I'd leave it a week between the videos just because to build up a little bit more stuff to talk about. Injury news, training sessions, another little friendly match as well in the middle, and of course some World Cup stuff to talk about as well. Not too much, mostly Tottenham Hotspur to be honest with you. Let's start with the most recent stuff. So, bad news on the Richarlison front. He's had his scan on that hamstring injury. Looks like 5 to 6 weeks. That obviously I think that will mean actually from the date of the injury itself. So that would then mean, mid-January, hopefully at the best, back, unless obviously he recovers quickly. If you're not aware of what happened, it appears to be that he picked up a kind of little hamstring issue in the warm-up before Brazil's quarterfinal, wasn't it, against Croatia. And I don't know why, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but played on for 84 minutes after having that problem in the warm-up. It's one of those, isn't it, where from an international perspective, of course, he's in a World Cup quarter-final. I can understand why a player, if that was the case, would want to try and play on. The flip side is, I'm trying to think, I did see large sections of that match. I think I was out of that one. But I did see quite a bit of it. I think I was watching it on my phone. He wasn't at his most mobile. It wasn't Richarlison, I think we know. So you do wonder whether it's one of those... It's obviously, with hindsight, whether you flash back and think, if he'd let someone else have a go, would, Brazil have been a bit more mobile, maybe been better able to score goals, perhaps, and then he could have maybe come back in for the future matches if they'd then gone through. It's all hindsight. Could have gone exactly the same way with or without him. But either way, unfortunately, Spurs will be without him for the first few games after the return. So, yeah, not great. Not great at all. I'm intrigued to see if it does have any bearing on what they do in the transfer market. Obviously, if you're talking mid-January, you're only 2 weeks into the transfer window anyway, 2-3 weeks at the most. So, will it play a big part in that? I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about transfers later on anyway. Conte I get the impression he does want someone at the back and someone kind of in an attacking creative role. My impression was that there was more a midfielder that could either play centrally and deeper or can also play as part of that front three utilises as well. So whether it would be another striker, especially the way we've seen Richarlison play at the World Cup, I think you would assume that he would become the backup striker to Kane, the way he played as a number 9 for Brazil as well. So I don't know if you then sign another one, but opportunities that come on the market, who knows? So that's the main one that we've kind of found out the latest on today. My partner in crime, Guesty's, put out a piece, I think, just as I was about to start this. There was training stuff yesterday, which has actually been quite informative. We got a little video of a very intense rondo going on, and also lots of photos, which is very helpful because it kind of informs us slightly about other things that are going on in the background. So good news. We're going to talk about good news and injury stuff. Ben Davies was playing what looked to be a full part in this rondo as well, which is great news because obviously, if you weren't aware, he picked up a really painful injury in his oblique muscle, which is in his abdominal area, and was potentially a doubt for the Brentford game. But he seems to have recovered nice and quickly, which is great because he was meant to be 3 to 4 weeks out from that game against England, which I guess is, it's just before Brentford game. I'm trying to work it out time frame wise, but either way, looks to be that he's all good, because I don't think you'd be putting him through what was a very much a rondo with sliding tackles, people throwing themselves into challenging aerial challenges as well, if there was any doubt about him. So that's great news. That's another player back in the fold that maybe we didn't think would be. Fraser Forster, who's been out with a knock, he seemed to be back involved with the goalkeepers again, so that's good news as well. Obviously, Rodrigo Bentancur still out with his little tear in his adductor muscle. He's suspended for the game against Brentford anyway, but there is hope that he'll be back for the Aston Villa game on New Year's Day. You know about Richarlison, why he wasn't there. Still no sign that we could see of Lucas Moura in any of the video, any of the photos, or anything. So it looks like he's still not quite involved in that regard. Emerson's back. He was definitely in that rondo, energetically putting himself about. So he seems to be back and fully fit. Who else? Ryan Sessegnon. God, it's a massive list, isn't it? We've got to go through. Ryan Sessegnon. We think, Guesty and I were both looking at this. We think we saw him in the background training on his own during the sessions, during the session that we saw. So which ties in with what I said, that he was working on the grass individually, not quite back with a squad. That would look to maybe still be the same thing. Hopefully back in time for Brentford. Because obviously it's going to be a bit tight for the likes of Perisic and Romero and Lloris, because obviously Perisic has got today the third place playoff game, the most pointless game in world football, other than, I think, doesn't it inform rankings? I think that's what it does. Yeah. The glory of the third place trophy. I don't know, there is a trophy. I presume you get medals. Maybe you get medals for third, but I don't know. But yeah, I'm sure most people would just rather have Perisic back those extra couple of days. So yeah, it'll be interesting with Sessegnon. Although, how Matt Doherty's been playing, you never know. It might be Matt Doherty on the left, the way things are going. Although I guess you could use Ben Davies at push as well. Who else? Obviously, if you weren't aware, Sess injured himself late on in the Nottingham Forest game, the Carabao Cup, which is why he's been out. It looked like a hamstring pull at the time. So obviously taking it gradually with him because of his hamstring issues in the past, but hopefully on the right track if he's outdoors and doing proper training. Sonny's obviously back and in training, still wearing his mask. He told Korean journalists before he left the World Cup that he was probably going to have to wear that for a little while yet. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg's in training as well, taking a full part. Pape Matar. Sorry, someone told me I'm saying that wrong. It's not Pape, apparently Pap Matar, which is going to take my brain an age to get used to when I've been saying it the same way for a year. So Pap Matar, who also played in a little friendly against Peterborough under-21s that we'll talk about in a little bit. But it really was a full-on rondo. It's properly, you can tell, a Conte session because he wants the players to pretty much train as they play, and you see that. And not only is there a real level of competitiveness, but it also extends to afterwards. They will get very upset, some of them, when they weren't given the win. So what I did was, normally you see rondos, they're quite a big circle, but this was quite a tight, small circle they were going in. And rondo, if you're not aware, it's like piggy in the middle. That's what we used to call it when we were playing football in the playground. A couple of people in the middle, people on the outside, they have to get the ball and stop it going to the people on the outside. But in this, so often that's like 2 or 3 players. But what was interesting was this was quite a tight circle, but there were about 4, 5, maybe. I'm trying to remember how many players there were now. There was quite a few in the middle. 3 players it was in the middle trying to win the ball back. And obviously when it's quite tight, I guess it's to recreate match situations, isn't it? It's playing quick passes, knowing where you're going to hit the ball next without even thinking about it, I guess. Trains you to be able to play under pressure, under teams pressing you as well. And it was very, very intense. You had Skippy sliding into challenges. I saw Basuma and Davinson Sanchez going up for a big header that left Basuma absolutely flattened on the floor. It was Bibs against non-Bibs, and it was the non-Bibs who won. They had Kulusevski, Longley, Doherty. It was quite a contentious decision. You could see the coaches decided who'd won. Emerson was very, very upset. Told one of the coaches that the other team didn't complete their final pass, so they shouldn't have won. And it was a funny little moment. So like Matt Doherty, I think as he goes off to celebrate, Ben Davies just walks over and just clips his heel and trips him. Not he's going to injure him anyway. And Ben Davies went down as if quite theatrically, and it was very amusing. Honestly, I'd have a little watch of it. It's on, I think Spurs tweeted it out. I can't remember if it's on their YouTube or on Spurs Play, but I can't remember where I watched it now. But what was quite funny as well was that the winning team do that thing that always seems to be the thing now of posing for a big group photo with the club photographer taking a photo. But what was happening was while they were trying to do that, the other team were lobbing footballs at them. And then Emerson took his bib off and tried to get in the winning photo. Jed Spence tried to stand on the end of it as well. They all looked very happy. I think that's the key way to say it, isn't it? It's they all looked to enjoy themselves while having a high level of competition. And that's what you want. I guess it's all kind of raising the intensity in gameplay now in training sessions before Boxing Day. Brentford and Boxing Day, which I was trying to plot my way to yesterday. Obviously, train strikes going on and working a way to get there. I have to try and find my way to the underground, which isn't massively close to where I live. But it's going to be fun. What else this week? So this week has also been a time for Antonio Conte to speak to the powers that be. Daniel Levy, the chairman, obviously, the managing director of football, Fabio Paratici, kind of talks over his contract, what happens next for Spurs going forward, and lots of kind of aspects to that as well. Yeah, I said this before, but I wrote this before. I don't think I've said this in the video before, but Spurs are quite hopeful that he's Conte. They're going to get him committed to a new, longer contract. They're hopeful. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. This is Tottenham Hotspur. Spurs have been hopeful over a lot of things in the past that haven't happened. But yeah, obviously Spurs have got this option. Conte is telling the world essentially that his deal ends at the end of this season. But Spurs are, they have this contract. They have this option to extend it by another 12 months, which was announced when he first signed, and has been clarified from various sources that yes, Spurs hold the option to extend it if they want, but obviously it's deserved more than that. Just look at it on paper is the easiest way to look at it, isn't it? I've got it written down here. 4th place finish, returned to Champions League football, led the Spurs to 4th again so far this season, 3 points off 2nd place Man City, and they're in the last 16 in Champions League, having topped their group. Obviously, you can argue about how impressive and convincing they have been in some of those games and everything, but you can't argue with what it says on paper and what he's done and where Spurs were. So yes, I think I've got the quote still down here. Yeah, I think I've got the quotes at the bottom. Essentially, I'll get back to them in a minute, but he did say that he felt he had to earn any new contract, and I kind of feel, and the club clearly, I think, will feel as well, that he has earned that. So, yeah, that's what the talks will be. They'll all be intertwined with kind of what comes next. Conte's not just going to put pen to paper on mediocrity. He's not going to want that. He's not even just going to want to put pen to paper on hoping to finish in the top 4. He wants more than that, of course. From the other side, yeah, there seems to be a feeling that he's happy at the moment. Apparently, a few people have told me that because he went off on I think I've said this before, he went off on a tropical holiday with his family, come back very tanned, seems really re-energised as well for the second half of the season, quite excited about what's to come. So that's all a good thing as well. I'm sure there'll be an aspect of it probably tying in as well with probably the futures of the star players in the teams, obviously Harry Kane being one of the main ones. I'm sure he'll want assurances of what happens with that, and obviously we need to know kind of where Kane's head's at after that. Whether that heartbreaking kind of way to end England's World Cup thing, whether that has a knock-on effect in terms of what he wants out of his career and things like that. I'd hope personally that he'll feel that he can win trophies with Conte at Tottenham, but you'd imagine it could be one big parcel. Either a very exciting parcel or a very disastrous parcel, depending on which way that goes. But yeah, there is a belief that Conte's happy, a belief that, a hope that he'll put pen to paper on a new longer term deal. You'd imagine it'd be a bumper deal with a bit more money for him as well. Like I say, he's got to deserve it. They'll kind of be tied in with the strategy talks about the January transfer window, what comes out of that window, what they can do, also what comes out of the summer. You'd imagine it's not going to be just about the next transfer window, it'll be about next season and kind of the progression and how far they can then push on. yeah, yeah, it's a big week. Well, it has been a big week, and I'd imagine that will kind of keep going as well, um, because Conte is a man who demands a lot. I think we know that, and Spurs are a club that don't always do what managers want, to their downfall and detriment over years. Sometimes of course demands can be a little bit silly, but you know we've seen Spurs having a well 20 years with one trophy, so they can't exactly say their way has worked. Um, when it comes to, I guess it is. It depends on it's how quickly Spurs want to progress and how that works in with the time frame of how quickly Conte wants to win things. You'd imagine Conte has now gone a couple of seasons. Well, we don't know how the season will end, but if it ends up being a couple of seasons without any silverware, he's not going to be very content with that. He definitely would want one at least next season. I know it's not as easy as it's said as easy said as done. You know what I'm saying? It was late night last night. So yeah, he'll want to know that the club is stepping up their time frame. He's said this quite a few times in the past. It's about how quickly a team wants to go on their process. He has always said it's about a number of transfer windows, but obviously the lesser amount of or the fewer transfer windows that you can, the better for Conte, I guess. Obviously, this transfer window upcoming, from what I understand, they're looking at least at 2 new players. Like I say, one defensively and one for attacking creativity. But obviously, being a January transfer window, you also, as well as that being a difficult task, you also look at any opportunities that arise in January transfer window. It's one of those, especially after this World Cup, where suddenly, I don't know, let's say one club has an injury at the World Cup and they have to replace that person with another one, but that also puts someone else's nose out of joint, so suddenly one player might become available at a club that you hadn't previously thought they would. It kind of can go all over the place, this one. This is very much an unknown transfer window because of that World Cup mess, and the World Cup hasn't been particularly kind to Spurs. They've had a few not so great injuries, obviously Richarlison being the worst of them. But other clubs have been the same. Arsenal just down the road. Gabriel Jesus, of course, he's going to be missing for a couple of months. So there's going to be other clubs like that as well that have had these issues. So, yeah, 2 new players at least. Obviously, if you could find 2 new players of the quality of Kulusevski and Bentancur, woohoo, that could be very good. But it's about, I guess, with the groundwork that's been laid in these last month or so to get stuff ready to go. I know obviously there's been the Pedro Porro links, the Sporting right back. I spoke about him briefly last week, and the obvious agency links because he's represented by CAA Base, who have very, very strong links with Spurs. They do a lot of business with them. Various clients that have played for them over the years. From what I understand with Porro, there is a little doubt over. He's a player that Spurs have liked for quite a while, a few years. Obviously, he used to be at Man City as well on their books, although I don't think he ever played. I'm trying to think if he ever played a competitive game for him. I don't think he did. But he's been on Spurs books for a little while. There's some indications that Paratici quite likes him as well. But I think where the doubts lie is whether he's a Conte signing. Physically, does he fit the mould of a Conte wing-back? You look at the players that Conte often has at wing-backs, and they are quite often tall, able to kind of get on the other side of the box to put in crosses from the other wing-back, pacey, strong. Porro, I think, has a lot of the qualities, but whether physically he's the exact mould that a Conte wing-back would be, that Jed Spence seems to tick those boxes there, doesn't he? But we'll talk more about Jed Spence a bit later, because he's actually been getting game time, albeit in friendlies against struggling Scottish teams and under 21s, but he's been getting game time under Conte. But with Porro, he is a talented player and he's looked good against Spurs both times. I think they would just have to see whether those doubts over his physically fitting a Conte wing-back would be too much to actually make a move or not. We'll see whether that is something that does happen and whether they do make any contact over him. Because he is a good player. It raises all kinds of questions over what comes next with the wing-backs in those positions, of course. And be an interesting one. It will. Like I say, a player that the club have liked for a little while, and practically by the sounds of it, but whether he's a Conte player is another thing. And obviously, it's one of those interesting ones, isn't it, where you see on social media people saying, "Oh, just get Conte what he wants, get what he wants," but then you'll get people getting very excited about a certain player that they want, and then I wonder whether they still stick to that diktat that oh yeah, but it has to be a player Conte wants. Because let's be honest, loads of people would love Jed Spence to play, but in the past, I don't know whether it is now. We'll find out in a couple of weeks' time whether Jed Spence is a Conte player. He's been very clear saying it was a club signing. Would you want to put another one of those signings on Conte as well? Oh, here's another person we like that maybe might not be right for you. Although I do think that Spence will be right for him. But yeah, no, I do quite find that interesting. I do wonder when I look on social media whether the same people who desperately want Porro are the same people that would say, give Conte whatever he wants. I don't know. I just find that side of fandom quite fascinating. The other thing I think that will be spoken about or have been spoken about is this kind of disconnect between the academy and the first team at the moment. The pathways are not as clear as it once was. There's a lot of brambles in the way and a lot of hedges to be climbed over to get from academy to the first team right now. Conte will use youth players in training quite a lot. Even at the drop of a hat, he'll ask for players from the development squad to join up and make numbers, sometimes even on match days, as in match days for the development squad. But has he used them in matches? No, he has not. There's a little difference as well in the outlook between the way that Conte views young players and their development and the way that I think other managers that we've seen in the past at Spurs maybe have viewed it. I did a piece on this and it kind of went on, aggregators took it and it made it sound a little kind of black and white and it didn't quite convey exactly what I meant. And I think people say, well, duh, that's really obvious. So what it is Conte's view, from what I understand, is that the academy staff should train, develop and prepare a player to instantly be able to slot into his Premier League team should he need them, or Champions League team, rather than him play a part in their development. So on kind of first thought, that kind of makes sense. I get the logic of the academy. He feels that they should be ready-made players to go straight into a team. However, I just think in reality, that's not how life works. I don't think you'll ever get a young player, other than the absolute odd phenomenon that you get like a Wayne Rooney or something, that come along very kind of once in a generation, who can slot straight into a first team without any prior experience of slowly being brought into it. And I think that's the difference. Whereas, I don't really want to compare different managers because it is different stages, different times, different kind of eras. But obviously, Poch would give minutes here and there to the younger players in the, let's say, the League Cup. And that is something that I think Guardiola and Klopp and people like that do as well. Whereas with Conte, we've kind of seen him build instead a stronger first-team squad. So there's not really room for youngsters in those domestic cup matches. That kind of makes it a little bit more difficult because if he's in his head doesn't feel that he needs to give any minutes to these players and they should be ready-made, I don't think you get very many ready-made 18, 19-year-olds right now that can slot straight into. You do. That's not to say it doesn't happen. But really, even the ones, I'd say Foden, Palmer and Lewis at City as well, they've all had little minutes here and there where they've started to kind of be used to then start bringing them in. They weren't ready, would say, to start matches straight away and things like that. So, yeah, I get both sides of it. I get that Conte is saying that the academy should be providing ready-made players, but I just get the feeling that he just doesn't really trust young players. And I think we see that in his lineups, in his selections, in the fact that even last season when there was a massive injury crisis and he had 4 academy players on the bench, not one of them got any time. Harvey White's now 21. Harvey White has had words of encouragement and praise from Conte. Never played a minute under him in a competitive game. And I don't, there's a part of me that does think, look, the other side to it is that Spurs are at a certain level now. I think I've used this little thing before, but Poch once said when he first started at Spurs, it was easier to bring in young players because they weren't challenging at the very top of the league. So you could bring in a player, in his words, that was maybe a 7 or an 8 in terms of like how good they were. Whereas when they got better, he said they had to be kind of a 9 or a 10. So I get that. I do get that. But the other issue it does kind of form in the academy is that there's a little bit of a frustration that where are these players going to go? Where's their ceiling like? Where can they ever play for Tottenham? We're obviously seeing the younger ones having to be loaned out. Some young players aren't signing new deals, so you're going to lose them eventually. Niall John may add himself into that category as well. So yeah, and the coaches as well, it'll be frustrating for them because obviously they're selling the dream of being a Tottenham Hotspur player, but it's obviously very difficult when you have a manager who isn't the biggest fan of using young players. He wants ready-made players to win now. It's a bit like cheating on Football Manager, I guess, isn't it? And giving yourself, like, when you used to be able to use the editor and give yourself like a £500 million budget rather than just try to bring some of the young players through from the academy. Just real life, I guess. Although I would say in those bigger teams, the big spending teams, there's still a belief in trying to bring top young players through from the academy as well. But yeah, also it's awkward, I guess, for Daniel Levy because he's always talking about this club DNA and promoting youth, world-class training complex, that's got to kind of show why it's there as well. But then I guess it's the crossroads to him because he says all that, and he said that about the next manager at Spurs after Mourinho. I remember the end of that season making a big thing about it would be an attacking, entertaining coach who would also bring in young players or bring through young players. Ended up with Nuno, who I guess he played young players because they were in the Conference League, but he was not an attacking, entertaining coach. And then obviously they brought in Conte next, who, well, make your mind up whether he ticks those boxes as well. But yeah, it's a crossroads for Levy because you're asking to maintain this club DNA, bring young players through, but on the other hand, you're a chairman that's had one trophy in your tenure in 20 plus years. So do you have to come away from that? Do you have to then start looking towards, I guess, a future that maybe has to be more ready-made? Does someone like Conte make you kind of go that way? That came close under Poch to doing it, I guess, the right way, depending on which, there seems to be a belief that the right way is to kind of not just throw money at the issue and to bring in young players. With Poch, obviously, they were second, ironically, to Conte's Chelsea. They pushed Leicester until dropping away in the final weeks to end up finishing third. But, yeah, it's an interesting one. So I can understand the frustration in the academy. I can also understand that Conte will have looked at everything that's come before and said, well, you need to do it differently. Just look what you've done. And obviously the fans are desperate for silverware, so I understand that as well. The academy obviously are worried that they're just going to risk losing. We've got some very good young players coming through. Obviously Alfie Devine. I think Jamie Donnelly is going to be a real talent as well. Will Lancashire that's come in that's very good as well. Obviously Dane Scarlett who's off on loan at Portsmouth as well. And Troy Parrott, can't forget about Troy. I think he's back in training now after his injury, so hopefully he kind of can push on now as well. Young Mikey Moore as well, who I've seen linked. He's only like, don't want to big him up too much because I think he's 15, but he's playing very much above his age group. There's been links with other clubs taking him. From what I understand, I think he is supposed to be happy at Spurs, but again, we're talking about a 15-year-old. I don't really want to. It's one of those, I really don't want to kind of go that way and hype up these players because a 15-year-old becoming a star is such a long way still to go and such a lot of effort to be put in. But just kind of using that as an example, these young players, do they believe that they'll be able to play for Spurs one day in the first team? And, at the moment, I can understand why some might think maybe I head off elsewhere. And I think that's what worries the club slightly as well. But yeah, I found his quotes that Conte came out with last month. I thought it was quite interesting about what comes next for the club, but also his contract. So apologies because I did probably read these out at the time, but I just thought it was quite telling with everything we've just been speaking about this week. So about his meetings with Levy and Paratici. After the first part of the season, it's right to have a meeting with the club and then to discuss the positive things, the negative things, and how we can improve. Then we'll see what we can do. It depends always on the possibilities of the club and also the ambition, but for sure we'll speak. We'll speak also to have a good evaluation about the first part of the season where I've seen a lot of positive things. But injuries and to play everything 3 days, I think we struggled a lot. In future, we have to try to improve, to be better, to face this type of situation. This would be a good way, in my opinion. Then we know very well we have to discuss with the club to make the right decision. And when he was asked about his contract and signing a new one, he said, "You know very well that my contract expires on June the 30th. I think that until that moment, the club has to make the best evaluation. I think everything you need to deserve. Everything you need to deserve. For this reason, it will be important to see the rest of the season what happens, and if we're happy with the improvement we're doing. But every situation, it's important to deserve. In my opinion, on my side, it's important for me professionally. I have to feel I deserve to have a new contract and to sign a new contract with this club. I have to feel this, but for sure we'll talk with the club and we'll find the best solution," which kind of suggests that, he might be looking to maybe kind of string it out a little bit. But it depends what's happened this week. We kind of need to know. I'd imagine it wouldn't have just been a week either. I'd imagine that there'll be a little bit more to it and seeing kind of things come to fruition as well. But we'll keep an eye on stuff behind the scenes. So what else? There was a friendly against Peterborough under 21s, as I pointed towards, which, I think because the plan originally was to have Spurs under 21s, just kind of do inter kind of club little training matches. But I think sounds like they would have got in Peterborough because they had so many Spurs players that obviously were not able to take part yet. So Peterborough's academy side came along for a training game. It wasn't shown. I don't even think they've got any clips. I think there was a struggle because the game was played. It was like -1 and -2. So I don't even think they could really get cameras working anyway, or certainly the ones they had. Otherwise, you'd have seen some clips already. A Spurs play would have put them out. So bear in mind they beat Motherwell 4-0 the previous week. Obviously got Nice next week as well. So they had this little kind of workout against an academy team. I guess the logic is to kind of have these younger, hungry players kind of up against you. Maybe add a different element to a normal friendly. Spurs won 3-1. Obviously worked more on match fitness, shape, understanding some of these new ideas that Conte seems to be trying to bring in for the second half of the season. Who else? Clement Longley was back in action. He replaced Charlie Sayers on the left of the back three. I think Charlie Sayers was involved at all, which makes me wonder whether he did go off a little bit earlier in the Motherwell game, which perhaps suggests he picked up a little kind of knock or something. So Longley came in, played 69 minutes, so that was good for him. Pape Matar was the first World Cup player to come back in terms of playing time. He came off the bench to replace Bissouma. I think I've written the time down. 21 minutes to go, which meant that he played just 10 days after playing the whole second half against England at the World Cup in Qatar. A little bit warmer in Qatar, I'd imagine, to the freezing temperatures of Hotspur Way. Emerson Lucas, Fraser Forster and Sessegnon weren't involved. Jed Spence was. Jed Spence got a long run out. So he got 74 minutes against Motherwell, and in this game he got a grand old 82 minutes. And he showed his versatility as well, because for the first time, he spent the first half as a right wing back, but in the second half, Conte switched him and Matt Doherty. So Doherty was on the right, and Spence was on the left, which I haven't seen before. And he did play his part in the... which goal was it? Oh yeah, he played Brian Hill down as an overlap on the left-hand side, and he picked out Doherty to score as well. So, wing-backs supplying wing-backs. That's what Conte wants to see. He's getting a lot of game time, and that's going to help him, and he'll hopefully be putting everything that Conte is telling him he wants out of him into practice. So that's good. From what I understand, I was asking around a couple of days ago, it doesn't seem like there's been any indication to Spencer or his people yet, though anyone that knows him, that he's to be sent out on loan or anything like that. So at this moment in time, nothing like that has been communicated. Whether that changes with what happens in the January transfer window, but hopefully that's a good sign at the moment that kind of there's been no discussion about a change in his future. But yeah, the problem for him at the moment is that Matt Doherty, yes, I know it's friendlies, but Matt Doherty looks so sharp right now. So, like I just say, scored. So that's his third goal in 2 friendlies. Looking very good whether he's on the left or right. Yes, I know got to take stand the opposition in, but you can also see a man looking confident and sharp in what he's doing. So yeah, it was another confident finish apparently. Brian Hill's low cross, he drilled it home from 12 yards. Could have had a second as well, but apparently Peterborough's Aaron Powell got in there to make a last-ditch block. Another 82 minutes for him as he gets fitter and fitter. And yeah, he's showing Conte that he's sharp. You know, last season I don't think there was any kind of real kind of question over who in the latter part of the season was Conte's main man on the right. It was Matt Doherty. And then obviously that rubbish Matty Cash tackle on him that did his knee. And hopefully, again, caveat that it's friendlies, but hopefully we're seeing a Matt Doherty that is getting back fitness-wise and sharpness to where he was. Which, you know, maybe this mini pre-season has benefited him in a big way to be able to do that as well. I just feel like for Jed Spence is a bit like, he's done all this work to get himself in a good position, and Matt Doherty is absolutely flying again. And then obviously Emerson is now back and fit. So the Nice game will give an interesting indicator as well, minutes-wise, over who gets what and where they're at. But the other thing that I noticed from the game and what happened, and because what it was, obviously wasn't able to watch it, where I was having to take accounts from what Spurs put out about the game, what Peterborough put out about the game, and also I was speaking to some people within the club and asking little bits and pieces as well. So kind of had to form a game in my mind that I didn't see. But yeah, maybe Spurs players should not take penalties for a little while. Or certainly it's just been a bad week, I guess, for Spurs players taking a penalty after poor old Harry's moment against France. On a far, 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 far lower level, Yves Bissouma took one and had it saved. To be fair to him, he won it, from what I understand, was a really good run. Took him past 3 players, again, showing that he shouldn't be the anchor man. But run past 3 players and then got brought down in the box. Took the penalty, but hit it low to the keeper's left, only for young William Blackmore, the posh keeper, to make the save. So, yeah, not a good week for Spurs players taking penalties. But, yeah, good to see Bissouma getting forward. Good to see that he's kind of trying to show that attacking side to his game, because I really want he and Skip to be used in the right way, rather than the way they have been used. That'd be awesome. Skippy as well, getting more, more minutes in the bank. And that attacking trio, again, Brian Hill, Harvey White as a false 9, and Dejan Kulusevski, all 3 of them apparently playing very well again. Harvey White getting on the score sheet. Sorry, my throat's got all tickly. Harvey White scored quite early on. When was it? I think I've got a time. 25 minutes, not that early. Kulusevski corner, headed on by Davinson Sanchez, and Harvey White knocked it home from close range. So good for him. Shows that, you know, you can also get involved with the attacking stuff. 2 minutes later, they scored a second. Kulusevski raced down the right, into the box, drew out the keeper, tucked it away to Brian Hill, who knocked it into the empty net. So yeah, Kulusevski again a creative force. Obviously they conceded a goal, I think it was about 20 minutes to go. So it was 3-1, but essentially, yeah, the game was kind of done. Kulusevski again pivotal, Brian Hill again very creative, and Harvey White, you know, showing that versatility. Probably never ever going to play minutes under Conte. Well, you never know. Maybe in the FA Cup game against Portsmouth, maybe that's the game. But it's quite nice to see a front 3, the one we're talking about, youth. White and Hill both 21, Kulusevski 22, and they're kind of showing that, you know, they're not the worst attacking trio in the world ever. Very much makeshift, but no, fair play to him. And there was some nice Harvey White quotes afterwards where he was explaining. There was a couple of other chances. Harvey White had another chance. He was stopped. Blackmore made a save from him, and the keeper also tipped over Brian Hill free kick, which apparently was a nice free kick as well. So Son obviously could be back for the Nice game. Kane potentially. I think he's due back early next week. So if I'm Harry Kane, and obviously I cannot put my brain into his headspace right now, but you'd imagine you'd want to just play football and try and get it out of your system. But obviously, fitness-wise, whether they don't want to push him too hard to put him in a friendly is another thing. So yeah, you may see a kind of a combination that maybe Son plays in the middle, maybe Harvey White comes out of that front three. Obviously, Lucas doesn't look to be back yet. But yeah, some nice quotes from Harvey White explaining playing in that false nine role, which kind of surprised a few of us. It's good to get minutes in the tank and nice to get on the score sheet. It doesn't happen that often, as in scoring, but also minutes in the tank. But when I get the chance, I wanted to be as clinical as possible. It's a different role, but in many ways it's like playing as a holding midfielder, my usual position. The passing patterns are similar, 1-2 touch, everything I'm used to, and then playing with Decky and Brian, that's been great. We're all on the same wavelength. And you can see that. They've been a good little attacking trio. And I do wonder whether Conte is kind of... You're probably not going to take masses from a friendly match, but the fact that those three can play together shows him a blend of players, because that's often the trouble. When we've seen these games where we kind of feel like, Spurs could change up all 11 players and give the other players a rest. The problem with doing that is often the blend of the players and the rhythm and which players can actually merge and play with each other quite well and which players look a bit awkward. So to have a very young front three that could maybe see out a game for you in a domestic one, let's say, that's it's all helpful knowledge. Skippy had some words as well. He said, it's always nice to get minutes after nearly a month without a game, really important, and we've treated the games in the right way. A good couple of performances, and they've been good in terms of getting back into the rhythm of playing matches. This season is a bit of a weird one, as usually you don't get this opportunity halfway through the season. By Christmas, there have been loads of games, but this has been a bit different. It's nice to have a reset, clear the mind a bit, and get ready for the second half of the season. And he was also asked if he's had any issues, with his previous problems, obviously the pelvic injury that kept him out for months last year, or this year. He said, I feel fine, no problems. So that's good. I mentioned that Portsmouth FA Cup game. That's obviously on the way, January 7th, 12:30 kickoff. Don't ask me why it's a 12:30 kickoff. But it's clearly selling well. I think there's some suggestions it might even be sold out because Portsmouth tried to get more tickets and were politely declined by Tottenham. Portsmouth put out a little statement which was following the sale of all 8,880 tickets for Pompey's Emirates FA Cup third round tie in the new year. The club contacted Tottenham Hotspur to inquire whether an extra allocation could be provided. The request was politely turned down by a host, with tickets also selling well among Spurs fans. I think there's this feeling, isn't there, of however much we've enjoyed the games of the World Cup, I think we all just want to get back to Tottenham Hotspur. And it's quite interesting because obviously before the break, there was a little bit of, I'd say more than a little bit of kind of disappointment with some of the performances that Spurs have been putting in. But clearly that hasn't reflected in a need to watch them when they come back because Spurs, well, they say it on their tickets page, so I can't deny it's true or not, but they say that the next 5 games against Villa, Arsenal, Man City, West Ham and Chelsea are all sold out, apparently. And it sounds like this FA Cup game's gone the same way as well. So it's funny, isn't it? We all moan and complain and everything, but it's the club, isn't it? You just still want to watch them, and obviously there's a bit of a belief about maybe what they can do in the second half of this season. So yeah, all sold out. So that should be good, noisy atmospheres. Portsmouth match, again, for anyone travelling, at the moment in time, unless anything changes, is going to be affected by the rail strikes. Like the Boxing Day match against Brentford is as well. So yeah, look out for those. Greater Anglia, London Overground, all affected. So yeah, not great, especially for a 12:30 kickoff as well. What else was I going to talk about? There was some strange... I keep an eye on Companies House, which is where big public companies have to... big companies have to declare various things they've done. You might have seen on there, if you looked as well, there's been little bits of movement by Spurs. I think it's all housekeeping stuff ahead of the financial statement stuff. Excuse me. The financial statement made me cough. But there's been little bits and pieces going on there. They made 4 submissions with a statement of capital of £11.452 million. a statement by the directors, a solvency statement, and a pair of resolutions. I noticed another little couple of bits went up yesterday as well. A reduction in issued share capital. So I've spoken to people inside the club and I've spoken to financial types outside the club. And it seems to be consensus among all of them that it is just purely housekeeping. It's not about extra money. It's just about converting shares, moving things around, essentially. So it doesn't seem to be too much to kind of read into. Because I saw it, I was like, oh, I'm going to write a big article about more money or something being made available. And I kind of asked around, and yeah, even people with no connections with the club were saying, no, it's just like moving things around and stuff. So it seems to be that they've still only taken 100 million of that 150 million capital that was being raised by ENIC. So we'll find out more. Obviously, I can't remember now, but I'm pretty sure I'm trying to think. I think the original statement said they had to use 150 million by the end of the year, was it? Again, it's one of those things that I wasn't thinking about actually talking about, so I didn't really look up again. But I feel like they had to use it by the end of the year if ENIC were to get that extra little bump up in their ownership percentage. So you'd imagine, well, what was there, 14 days left of this year, so they've got 2 weeks to think about that if they are going to do it. The financial statement should be coming soon. From what I understand, the statement side of it is all sorted and it's just got to kind of be released. I presume that will be early next week. I've been told it's imminent for about a week now. But that'll be out there, and that'll give us a good look into, I guess, what's been happening. The revenue coming in from the stadium now it's been fully open will be interesting as well. And often in these things, although it will be to do with the last financial year, often Spurs will take into account and talk about what they did in the summer, because often they like to say, oh yeah, but we spent this and this, and don't forget that. So you often get a bit of that as well. So you get a little bit of a glimpse of things that have happened in this season or for this season. Mostly it'll be about, I guess, looking to see the improvement on pandemic revenues, I guess, and stuff like that. There'll be a lot to take from that as well. So yes, we shall see. Hopefully that's finally brought out. It's not today. I definitely checked to see whether it was going to come out today while I was doing the video. It doesn't appear to be coming today. I'd imagine it has to be a working day, I would have thought. Presumably it goes out to the market and all that sort of stuff. I can actually just check because I have the company's house page open, which I've been refreshing every day, like the sad man I am. I say sad man, technically it is my job. I'm meant to keep an eye on these sort of things. But yeah, so what else we got? We got a Nice match on Wednesday, which I'm not actually able to go to. I'm going to, it's one of these things where long-standing arrangements pre-Christmas have been made, so I'm going to have to catch up and watch. I think Spurs play showing it live, which means there should be a full version of it, which I will watch afterwards to make sure I didn't miss anything. I think Guesty is going along, so if there's anything that happened behind the scenes or anything, he will let me know of that, so I'll be able to talk about that in the next video. You'd think Sonny will be involved, Højbjerg would be involved, Emerson, Davies probably should now after looking like he's back in. Like I say, for Harry Kane it might be a bit tight, but potentially could be involved. And obviously a much, much bigger game taking place tomorrow. Hugo Lloris, Christian Romero, head-to-head as France take on Argentina, which should be a very good World Cup final, you'd think. Sometimes it doesn't work that way and you get an absolutely drab one where they cancel each other out. But obviously there's so many subplots, isn't there? There's Mbappe against Messi, of course, PSG teammate. And then Hugo Lloris. Hugo Lloris is the thing standing between Messi and the last thing on his CV, really, to probably, Messi wins the World Cup. I think it kind of just only confirms he is the greatest of all time. But for Lloris can become the first, I think, male captain. I feel like there's been female captain, maybe the USA one has won it back-to-back, but it'll be the first male captain to win back-to-back World Cups, which is an incredible achievement. And for me, just yet another thing to kind of just put him in this top-tier category of goalkeepers. We have this thing where when we see someone week in, week out, we maybe have, especially goalkeepers, because they're that last line, aren't they? So if they make a mistake, it's very noticeable. And I think we kind of, in England, we kind of have critical, I think is just the best way to put it, of Hugo Lloris. It's quite interesting. I see, again, social media. I know there's some people that really hate it when I refer to people on social media, but it is part of my job. I have to kind of keep an eye on that as well. So it's an interesting way to kind of gauge and see what people on social media look at stuff. And I find it fascinating to see there's often contradictory ways people look at it. So Lloris is a good example. So I put out a piece on Hugo Lloris yesterday just saying how, there's a real respect for him within the French squad and what a legend he is and a belief in him. Whereas I think maybe in England he doesn't get that. And some Spurs fans say, yeah, but we see him week in, week out, so we know that he's not really that good or something. And then it's interesting because you'd ask them, who would you like instead? And they'll name a goalkeeper who clearly they haven't watched week in, week out. And I could probably go to most clubs and ask about those goalkeepers, and their fans would say, oh yeah, no, he's got a mistake in him and stuff like that. And it's just funny the way we see things. Sometimes we don't appreciate quite what we've got because, the English press were calling Lloris the weak link, weren't they? Although from what I'm told by some French people, some in France, some of the media in France were questioning before the tournament whether, others should get a chance. Is it Mike Magnin? I can't remember how you pronounce his name. There's some suggestion that maybe Lloris was in a little bit of a threat. His position was in a threat. I don't think it ever was. But yeah, so there was this criticism about Lloris ahead of the game, which Lloris, it was put to him quite bluntly in a press conference. He took it very well, very gentlemanly, classy response. And then obviously proceeded against England to have a terrific match. Denied Kane. I remember Jude Bellingham won. He made a terrific tip over. He was excellent, Lloris. It was a really, really good performance. And after the game, I saw RMC Sport, one of the French media outlets, did like a big kind of behind-the-scenes piece, essentially, on the France and the win against England. And one of the things they said was that the France players were just bemused by this thinking in England that Lloris was like a weak link in the team. And it only kind of fired them up. All the young players were, and they all kind of really united behind a man that is not only the goalkeeper, but a real leader. He's one of those guys that when he talks, just all the players just listen to what he's got to say. He's like legendary status within that team. He's now 144 appearances for France now, which is 2 clear of Lilian Thuram, but also 21 ahead of the third highest appearance maker, which was Thierry Henry. Apparently in the England game, he spoke at half time and it really kind of fired up the team to just kind of push on in the second half as well against England, because obviously France weren't that great. And it was put to the France midfielder and Real Madrid midfielder Aurélien Tchouaméni. I'm so sorry. I'm so awful with pronunciations. He was quoted with RMC Sport what he was saying about Lloris, the weak point of Le Blues, according to the English press. It's beep. He said a bad word. He said there are always things that are said in the press, and the most important thing is to respond on the pitch. He did that today, and we are very happy to have him in our team. He was also good against Morocco. A couple of reaction saves that helped them keep a clean sheet as well. You think about it, he's like 35 years old, made his debut for France in November 2008. He was just 21. And since then, obviously, he's been there, done it, bought the T-shirt, and now he stands on the verge of this historic achievement of being first male captain to win back-to-back World Cups or lift them. It's incredible. You don't become the captain of France for 14 years if you're average, let alone poor. I guess you could say being a World Cup winning captain makes you a legend. To do it, twice back to back would just put him in this kind of league of his own. It'd be incredible. And even, you look at his Spurs stuff as well. More than a decade now at Spurs. Undisputed number one as well. 437 appearances, 148 clean sheets. The deal that brought him from Lyon now looks like the most ridiculous bargain ever. He was signed for 7.8 million, with Lyon getting 20% of any profit that Spurs would get from a future sale. That sale has obviously not happened. 10 years and 4 months on, sell-on clause has been completely unnecessary. And not to mention the millions that Lloris has saved Spurs over the years and having to replace him. It's all very well saying, we need an amazing new keeper. To replace Lloris with the level standard of a keeper you'd need to spend 30, 40 million. Huge money, I think. Honestly, he's definitely going to be one of those that he'll be missed when he eventually either moves on or hangs up his gloves. He really is. I remember Nuno Espirito Santo, I think, was quite keen to see him succeeded, as it were, when he was at Spurs. Paratici thought, I think, that Galini could be the successor. Didn't happen. If anything, Lloris just redoubled his efforts, got even better. Yeah. And Conte kind of came in and was just like, what? It's like, no, he's a fantastic goalkeeper. Push for push for the club to give Lloris a new contract, which they did. And I remember this quote he said at the time. I wrote it down because it made me chuckle. There's a sporting director in Italy, Pantaleo Corvino. He says you can make mistakes about your wife, but not about the striker or the goalkeeper. This is the best quote to understand football to build a team. We're talking about two important players with good experience. He was talking about Kane and Lloris at the time. So yeah, look, his kicking can be erratic. Of course it can. I kind of referred to it when he was asked about those weak link things, and he just said, look, when you're someone like France, and I guess the same with Spurs, teams will come and press you, and that's what they do. And it does make it more and more difficult to kind of play calmly out from the back as a goalkeeper. But it is something clearly that is a part of his game that does produce mistakes. I always feel with Lloris, his best consistent moments have been when he's been told, no, don't worry about kind of little short passes. If you have to kick it longer, kick it longer. And then he can just concentrate on his reaction stage. Because as a shot stopper, he is one of the best in the world. And honestly, tomorrow will bring the biggest possible test for him. Standing in between Messi and the goal. And yeah, honestly, there's a part of me that would love to see Lionel Messi go on and confirm that he's the greatest of all time by winning the World Cup as well. And obviously for Christian Romero, it'd be fantastic as well. Big thing for him early in his career. But also, I'd love to see Lloris win back-to-back. I think a few, obviously, English people after defeat would not want France to win it. But for me, for Lloris, it would just be incredible. And an absolutely incredible achievement for him. And he is, he's like the consummate professional as a footballer. And yeah. So it's one of those where I'd kind of not quite be happy either way. I don't know. Maybe lean slightly towards Lloris winning it because I think it'd be very cool for his career. But one thing is for sure, honestly, do not underestimate Hugo Lloris. The moment you do, I think, is when he pulls out his best performances. I hope he doesn't. Hugh's going to make like a really bad mistake in the final, which I think he did, didn't he, in the last World Cup final? He did. He'd had a good tournament, but then he made a silly little ricket with his feet again in the final. But also made a few saves as well. So, yeah, right. I think that's it, really. I'm probably going to head off now. But, yeah, hopefully enjoy the World Cup final. Nice game next week. Financial results to come. It should be plenty. I'll try and fit in one before Christmas. Maybe Thursday next week. We'll see how we go after the Nice game. And, yeah, I think that'll be the last one before Christmas. And, of course, Boxing Day in Brentford. So we will also chat about that after that game. So there you go. Right, going to head off now. Like I say, transfer stuff will start ramping up as we get closer and closer to the window. At the moment now, there's a lot of kind of foreign media outlets that are just saying, oh yeah, Spurs want to sign this player, that player, everything. It's a time for agents to start pushing their players, and there's going to be a lot of stuff out there that's going to be like, really? And there's going to be stuff that, of course, is also likely, as in definitely will be interest there. But I want to wait a little bit until we get into an area that's more, more definitive. That we can, I don't want to just talk about random names that have been put out there. Otherwise, we'll be talking all day. Tottenham are linked with everyone in the world. Seems to be in Portugal at the moment as well. Seems to be the newest. Everyone in Portugal as well as Serie A. But yeah, we'll start drilling down into the transfer stuff properly. Probably in the next couple of weeks, I'd imagine, because obviously when the window opens, we'll have loads to talk about in that regard as well. But there you go. Right, going to head off now. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And yes, stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.